Hello and welcome to episode 4 of No Time to Cry. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon,
And I'm Laura.
and today's episode is all about friends and support networks. And the reason we've done that is purely because we've had so many messages about it since our episodes, haven't we?
Yeah, which Shannon and I both had a chat about this, and it's really lovely that so many of you have found the first couple of episodes relatable and that some of it resonated with you. But it's also really sad,
Yeah.
and we recognise that there are people who are just about to go through this or have just started their grief journeys, and of course, there's lots of you out there who want to figure out the best way to support your loved ones. So that's kind of what we wanted to focus on today for you.
Yeah, and talking of support networks, I think it's only fair if you're watching this on YouTube. This is probably the third different iteration of what our background looks like when we record. So, just an absolute thank you to Laura's husband, Todd, who has not only donated a room to us from his showroom, but actually decorated it, kitted it all out, and just made it look a hell of a lot more professional.
Absolutely, yeah. Shout out to Todd. Todd James, Handcrafted Kitchens. If anybody's
Yeah.
in the market for a bespoke handcrafted kitchen,
And
you know where to
also,
go.
Todd, we are looking for sponsorships. Thank you. um, but yeah, like we said, we've had tons of messages about all different kinds of things, but there was really a theme that seemed to be from a lot of people reaching out who maybe haven't lost um a loved one but want to know how to support, or have maybe lost a loved one but don't know how to support somebody else that's going through that. So I think we wanted to just talk a little bit about how important our support network was to us when we first lost our parents, the kind of do's and don'ts. So and this is our opinion, isn't it? So
Yeah, it's very personal. And we actually both said that it's interesting because, yes, we have a lot of similarities, but there's definitely some differences in mine and Shan's experience as well, isn't there? So,
yeah, and I think it's only fair to say that that will be different for all of you guys. So take this with a little bit of a pinch of salt, in that it's our opinion, our experiences. We've also had friends and other family members who have lost people. So it's not just our experience of losing mum and dad, but loss presents itself in so many different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be death, it could be you're grieving a partner that you've split up from a long term relationship.
a
It could
friendship.
friendship. Me and Laura have both lost friendships along the way, even during our grieving period, haven't we? Um, and it could even be, maybe you've taken a step away from an individual and you're choosing not to speak to them anymore, a bit like what I had to do with dad. And that's why I said in my episode, I started grieving him before he even passed. So yeah, I think there is so many different ways that you can grieve, and this is just our take on what your friends and family can do for you. We've also written down some of the questions that we've been asked, because we want to make sure you feel heard if you've asked them and you've got your answers to some degree.
And thank you for that as well. We weren't quite expecting as much interaction as we had. So, yeah, we just wanted to make sure that we prioritised that really for the next episodes, didn't we? So,
Yeah, and let's start just by talking about maybe how important our networks were to us, our friends, our families, the people that we had around us. I know that we were both very lucky in that we have very supporting partners, aren't we?
yeah, definitely.
And, we had each other, which we spoke about a little bit. But actually, that was really interesting, because although me and Laura did have each other, and that was a great support in so many ways, we did trigger each other a lot, didn't we?
Yeah, and there were even moments, weren't there, where we sort of had to say, I love you so much and I want to be there for you more than anything, but actually the right thing for me to do right now is to not step in and help,
Yeah.
which sounds crazy because obviously you want to be there for your best friend, but when you're going through grief so close together in terms of the times that we lost our parents, you do have to be conscious that you're doing right by yourself, but also by, your best friend or the person that you want to help, because sometimes you can actually make it worse, unfortunately. So
Yeah, and from the beginning, you know, maybe that's just because we're so open with each other, but we really did talk about that quite often. And
yeah.
I think because it came up straight away, didn't it? And it was us trying to support each other, but also recognize that the way that I was going to deal with my grief wasn't necessarily the same way that Laura was going to deal with hers.
Yeah. Yeah, because they were quite different, weren't they? And I remember really vividly your therapist Sue just saying, girls, like, just be careful, like, look
Mm,
after each other, be there for each other, but also be conscious and cognizant of times when actually it isn't right to step in and to take a step back. And we did that, and we still made sure that we were really supportive
yeah.
of each other, and we're closer than ever, aren't we, because of it?
Yeah,
So
definitely. And thanks, Sue, for that one because I'm not sure I think sometimes as friends, you want to be there no matter what, no matter if it's difficult for you or you're struggling yourself. You're just like, but it's my best friend and I've got
yeah.
to be there. And actually, it was a very grown up approach that we took where it was I'll be there for you when I can be. I'm always here. It doesn't mean I've necessarily got to be in your grief with you when I'm dealing with my own. And me and Laura speak most days, but actually during our grieving period there was, maybe up to a week at a time where we didn't speak because we just needed that distance, but there was a mutual understanding as to why we weren't speaking and why we were doing that. um
Yeah, and it's the same as we'll talk about sort of now. There will be Everybody goes through grief differently. There are some people who need lots of support in terms of talking to people, lots of additional communication. Some people completely sort of retreat from that, don't they? And decide, actually, I need to be by myself, and they withdraw themselves. I was that person big
yeah.
time, wasn't I? And we can talk about that today. But yeah, everyone's different, and I think that's the important thing to be conscious of with this, is that you know your friend better than anyone, or your loved one, or the person that you care
Hmm.
about. But grief might hit them in a way that you would never expect it would either. So it's kind of just being a bit flexible with how you support as well, isn't it? Because you might be a bit shocked by how the person that you care about and love responds, I
Yeah.
guess, to their loss,
Oh,
right?
we
So,
had that a lot because Laura and I have probably spoke about it a couple of times now that we are seen as the strong ones in the family, strong ones in our friendships. And actually neither of us dealt with grief particularly well. And I say that in an instant that I don't think there is a great way to deal with
there is,
grief.
it's just shit.
Yeah, it is.
It's just really shit.
But maybe the right way of saying it that actually we didn't react how people anticipated us to react to grief rather than not the right way, because I think the way that we responded is perfectly
Normal.
normal and
Yeah.
understandable. It was just for our characters that wasn't how people anticipated we would be. They
Mm.
thought that we would probably be, you know for me, I know you were on maternity leave, Law, but for me I think people anticipated I'd be the type that'd go back to work after a week and would go, no, I just need to be distracted. I just need to crack on. I need to, take my mind off it. And actually, I just couldn't.
No, and I remember that so well. I remember in the very early days of you losing dad, like you said, some people jump straight back into what they see as sort of normality, if you like, and there is no such thing as normality after you lose somebody. It's sort of a new normal that you have to try and sort of get used to. But a lot of people either jump straight back into life to try and occupy themselves really and to keep themselves busy. But like you said, Shan, you didn't do that, and I thought you would.
Mm,
Even being your best friend, and you were the opposite. And even the things that you loved doing, um, like going to the gym and going to pole
yeah.
dancing lessons and stuff, you completely decided
Yeah. I
that
just dropped out of it
you weren't
all.
ready to do it. And I remember so clearly having that conversation with you about, I feel guilty doing it. I can't feel like I'm
Yeah.
experiencing any joy or any happiness in these days.
I think the other side of it was that I also didn't want to tarnish anything that brought me joy
Yeah,
and then
that's a
it
good
and
point.
then
Yeah.
find that it didn't bring me that joy, and then that I just was like, well, I can't, I like, I've lost passion for it.
Mm.
I've lost the things that I love doing, trying to do them to get through my grief, when actually there was nothing that was going to make me feel better at that time. So I was just like, I don't have the motivation for it. I don't want to force myself, because then I'm not going to want to go. And then when I'm ready, I was worried that it would still be something that I just couldn't get hold of. So I, like you say, I stopped going to the gym, which is somewhere where I go 4 or 5 days a week. I do pole fitness. I completely stopped doing that for pretty much 9 months.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a few things. I think it was just I was struggling to find the joy in life, but I also knew that there was these things that when I was ready I can come back to, but there was no point forcing myself
No.
into them before I was ready to do that.
You've got to take it day by day, haven't you? Which sounds like really obvious, but it isn't. In the early days, I think your brain sort of goes into overdrive. It's especially if you go through sort of a tragic loss and a sudden loss as well. Like you're in survival mode almost,
Yeah.
aren't you? And just getting by and getting through each day is actually a massive victory. And anyone who's doing this right now, like hats off to you,
Yeah.
because it's really, really hard. Like to the point where I remember when we had chats initially, like I couldn't get out of bed
No.
for weeks. I couldn't speak to anyone. Anybody who knows me knows I'm awful with my phone anyway. um, but even my phone became a trigger for me,
Yeah.
because obviously I got a call on the day that mum passed away, and then as lovely as it is when you first lose somebody and you get so many messages, don't you?
Yeah.
Which is super kind and it's really lovely. But I couldn't open them, because if I
Yeah.
read them and I was seeing in black and white, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss," it was just like a dagger to the heart. I just
Yeah.
couldn't for a while. I couldn't
I was
read
the
them.
same. We both had that. So, from and like we said on episode 1, I wouldn't say don't send those messages.
No, yeah,
It's more of a don't anticipate a response, or don't get offended if that person doesn't respond to you. It's because you're one of maybe over 100, but also if I was to receive just one message, that might be fine. But when you're getting multiple messages, reading that several times a day is really tricky. And I remember Jamie, my fiance, saying, right, let's get some fresh air, because similar to you, Laura, I just trapped myself inside and didn't want to face the rest of the world, probably because I couldn't stop crying. And you don't want to just be walking through the streets in floods of tears.
or
um
Tesco,
or
as we told you,
yeah, I
we
did do
both
that.
have getting a meal deal, and
Yeah, crying our eyes out.
yeah.
But Jamie was like, right, let's go for a walk. And there's I don't actually think it is called Frodsham Hill, but it might be called Helsby Hill or something like that. But we call it Frodsham Hill, and it's a place that we absolutely love, and you can see it right across Liverpool and some of Cheshire and right over to even Wales. And we went up there, and he just said to me, "Leave your phone in the car,
Hmm.
because this hole that you're in is every time you get a message, like you said, Law, it's getting worse. It was just making me cry. I would be all right for 10 minutes, and then I'd get a text message, and then I'd be in tears again, because it was just that constant reminder, your dad's dead, your dad's dead, your
Yeah,
dad's dead.
it is.
It's
And
like, oh.
it's similar to that thing, sometimes when you really want to give a friend a hug, but you know that you'll make them cry.
Yeah.
It's that similar thing of
Yeah. You're like, I won't hug you because I don't want to make it worse.
but the thing is to remember that always send the message. We're not telling, we all, I think we both found, didn't we? All the messages that we received when we were ready to open them and to read them, we got so much comfort out of reading them. And, we're so grateful to people for reaching out to us. But just, yeah, like Shan said, I think it's just being conscious and being mindful of don't expect somebody to respond straight away, even if you've seen that they have read it.
Yeah.
And don't be offended because with the greatest of respect, in that moment, all they can really think about is the fact that they've lost
Yeah.
their loved one, and that's all that's in their head, really. So
Yeah. And I think you have, as the individual that received the text, you then have that, oh God, I need to respond to that. I feel really bad that I haven't responded.
yeah,
So I remember, and this is something I do now to anybody that's lost someone. Whenever I message them, and I do message people that have lost people, because again, we think you should. I do always say, please don't feel like you need to respond.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I hope you're well. As well as you can be. It's shit, deal with it however you need to, but I'm here if you want to talk and you need an ear. And that's probably one of the biggest recommendations that I would give when you're reaching out to somebody. And I did mention it on episode 1, is just that, listen, don't feel like you need to reply back. Do you want to talk about Todd? We've already spoken
Yes,
about him quite a lot
absolutely.
today, so
Yeah. So yeah, Todd's my husband, for any of you who don't know Todd. And that man, bless him, the amount of things that he sacrificed actually when I lost mum was insane. To be there and to support me. And he has his own business, so it was a really big deal for him to take time out of work because, of course, when he's not at work, he's not bringing the money in, is he?
yeah.
But he couldn't not do that for me, and I said to him, "Please go back to work. Like, I really want you to carry on and to continue, doing what you need to do with your life." And he was like, "Absolutely not. There is no chance I'm doing that." And he didn't. He stayed by my side for almost a year, wasn't it, in
Yeah.
total, in terms of the time that he took out of the business. Um, and the best way that I can kind of sum it up is that he was my absolute constant. He was just always there, no matter what it was that I needed or maybe didn't need or felt like I didn't need. He was often giving me sort of ideas around what I could do. He wouldn't position specific things that I could do as what I had to do, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So people often say, "Oh, like, what was one of the most helpful things Todd did do, particularly in the early days?" And I said, "Truly, I don't think you really know what you want in the early days of grief, do you? It's impossible to know, and every day is slightly different as well. You might have a slightly better day, or you might have a significantly worse day. So it's very up and down." But what he did do was he just didn't. He was kind of like relentless actually with making sure that I always knew he was there and that there'd always be offers on the table to go for a walk
Yeah.
or to go out for a coffee or to go to the supermarket, just anything. But in particular, I'd say, and I think you'd agree with this, Shan, as being the same, he'd try and put forward sort of more simple sort of
Mm.
daily activities that in a normal world are dead straightforward to do. When you're grieving, they can feel like the
Yeah, it's
hardest.
like low maintenance stuff. It's not things that are going to mean that I've got to think about an outfit or doing my hair or doing like I don't want to go to dinner when I feel like
Yeah,
this, but I might want to go to the supermarket with you.
you don't want to put on a brave face, do you?
No.
And that's the thing, and that's what he would do every day for me. He'd say like, "How are you feeling today?" And if you don't know how you feel, don't worry. You don't have to talk about it. And he'd sort of always give me that permission in the respect of saying, "What is it that you want?" Because
Mm.
I just want to help you as best as I can. And there'd be some days he'd say, "Do you want to go for a walk?" And I'd say, "Absolutely not. I'm really not
Mm.
ready for it." But then there'd be other days when I'd be really thankful to him for the fact that he had offered, and we had gone for a short walk, and it made me feel 100 times better. Um, so I think that's one of the big things that he always did for me. It was just making sure that I always had the permission to push back and sort of say, "Actually, I don't want
Yeah.
that," or "Can we do this instead?"
And I've had friends that their partners have suggested that they should, you need to get back to life now. You need to just
Don't do that.
don't do that, please. Almost along the lines of, come on, how long are you going to feel like this for?
And yeah, had unfortunately a couple of people in my life who said similar things like that to me, like almost like you're not over it yet.
Yeah.
And they don't mean it like that way. I think a lot of people are just in their heads. They're thinking
It will help.
it'll
Go back
help.
to work, it will help. It'll make you feel better. A bit of normality. And it's like, fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is normal? There's no such thing as like normal. Like, and you have to go through the process of finding, like we said before, like your new normal because life is different. You are a different person when you lose somebody that you love so significantly. And
Mm,
it's a bit deep to say this, but it's true. Like when my mum died, a part of me died with her.
100%.
Like I'm not the same person. In some ways for the better, actually,
Mm-hmm.
which we can come on to in another episode maybe as well. But um, yeah, like I find things very, very difficult now that perhaps I found easier before. But equally, I find some things, a lot of things don't bother me much
Resilient.
anymore. Yeah, a lot of things now I'm like, do you know what? My mum died, so there's not really much worse that can happen, and I can get through challenges maybe a little bit easier than I could do before, because when you it changes perspective, totally
Yeah.
lost, doesn't it, on
100%.
life? What would you say about Jamie, Shan?
You know, I find it hard to talk about him. That's why I asked you about Todd before. Yeah, I have always been a very independent person my whole entire life. If any of you have listened to the episode before, you'll understand why. And I've always said, I'm with Jamie because I want to be. I don't need him. I choose him every day and I choose to love him every day because I want him in my life and he means the world to me. And when my dad died, I needed that man. I needed him. It gives me goosebumps. It literally brings a tear to my eye. I can't speak about him in that time period without getting upset. Just so grateful for everything that he did for me. He literally picked me up off the floor, just carried me, probably even up into today, just emotionally, the way that he's there for me. And listen, we've been together, it'll be 10 years in Jan. You know, it's not like he wasn't there for me before, but I didn't need him to be. I was very emotionally sort of aware and I know where I'm at. I know what I need. I'll tell you if I need anything. Whereas, like you said, I didn't know what I needed.
No.
I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know the depths of sadness that I could get to. I didn't understand it. I've never been in that space before. And I saw a TikTok. You all know me and Laura, prolific for spending hours on TikTok. I saw one the other day, and it was this woman talking to her daughter and her daughter's friends. And she said, listen, don't worry about all these other things, what you like, what you don't like. Find a person that you know will hold your hand through the grief of losing a parent, because
Hmm.
that is someone that you marry. And again, it gives me goosebumps. That is exactly who he is. And I loved him millions before that. But after the fact, I just,
It goes to another level, doesn't it? I think it can make
I
or
didn't know I
break you,
could love him
though.
more. I didn't know
Yeah.
I could love him more. And actually, that just built a complete different level to our relationship. And I think in the 2 years since dad died is the strongest we've been in 10 years, because I realised that although I don't need him all the time, he will have my back through
No matter what.
anything.
Yeah.
And he'll find this really difficult to listen to, so apologies. Because
Sorry, James.
sorry, James. But even when we talk about it, he's like, "Oh, don't say that, don't say." He gets like really awkward about it. But I said, like, honestly, you were incredible, and I'll just forever and ever be grateful for that.
They're very similar, aren't they? We always say this as well,
Yeah,
as similar as Shannon and I are. Todd and Jamie are very similar.
yeah.
And they were just our absolute rocks, weren't
Yeah,
they? Just
and
incredible.
Jamie, similar to Todd, owns his own business, and he was probably only a year in when Dad died, so it was a startup, and he again just took time off work, laid in bed with me when I needed to lay in bed, went for walks with me when I needed to go for a walk, and just never rushed me back to work. It was always, listen, we'll work it out. Money comes and goes. If you want time off work, you have that time off work. Yeah.
Yeah, they were both amazing, weren't they, in that respect of just sort of letting us know that no matter what, they would be there, and whatever that looks like, that's the
Mm,
support they would offer. And
yeah. And Jamie just allowed me to do the big ugly cries.
yeah.
You know, he would never felt uncomfortable. In fact, for the first 2 weeks, every time I cried, he cried. And was also grieving my dad. He knew my dad. He was so sad for me. And every
Yeah.
time he saw me upset, every time he saw me cry, and I remember him speaking to my uncle. We were at my uncle's house, a week or so after dad died, and my uncle was getting a bit teary, and he was, he is a lad's lad. Well, I shouldn't be crying. I'm the man, and I've got, and Jamie turned around and said to him, "Mate, I haven't been able to look at her in the face for 2 weeks without bawling my eyes out. Don't feel like you can't sit here and
Oh
cry.
no,
Your
yeah.
brother's just died."
I think it's a thing though for men, isn't it? A lot of men feel like they can't show emotion or express emotion, and it's really sad that. But I think our generation is breaking that down a little
Mm,
bit.
it is, but then I had a conversation with a friend's partner the other day when I was at their house, and he was still talking about how his friends just don't talk about anything. So don't talk about any
Oh,
emotions. And that does make me sad because, this topic is friends and support network. And we count ourselves particularly lucky. We've got great partners. We had each other. We've got other friends, mutual friends that helped us through it all.
yeah,
Shout out to Paula. You were a godsend. um, and actually, it does make me particularly sad when I think about the men in my life, and would they have had the support if the shoe was on the other foot? Would they have had the support that I had from a partner? Yeah, if you've got one. But if you don't, you're relying that you've got a good relationship with your family, which you might not do. You're relying that you might have siblings, which you might not do, and if you do, you might not be particularly close with them. And what does that look like for you? And that's why this is so important, because if you are listening and you've got friends that might not even be going through grief at the moment, but might at any point could do, please make sure that you start having these conversations beforehand, not necessarily about death or anything like that. That could be quite morbid, but just regularly checking in and having more emotional conversations, because I don't want anybody to get to a point where, one, they're either struggling like my dad did and felt like they couldn't speak to anybody and end up, feeling so lonely they decide to take their own life, or to do grief by yourself is just, I can't actually think about how I would have got through if I didn't have you guys, and what that would have looked like. And similar to Laura, um, I also did seclude myself slightly to begin with, and then, but I was always having conversations. I was always talking to somebody. I had Jamie there. I had that, you know, person that was there for me. If your friend is grieving at the moment and they don't have a partner, or that they've not got the best relationship with their family, be that support network for them. Reach out, do stuff that, offer the simple things, come round, offer to cook. And actually, let's talk about that. Let's talk about things that were useful
yeah,
to us that our friends and family did during that time. We've spoke about it a little bit from Jamie and Todd's perspective and what they did, but for people that maybe don't have partners or don't have a particularly, you know, maybe they don't have a partner like Todd and Jamie that are as emotionally available, or would be there for them as much, what could their friends do in this space?
yeah. And again, this will look different for everyone, won't it? But I think we talked about some of the things that we think are pretty commonly well received. Not for everyone. And again, it does depend, I guess, on the day that you offer it. But one of the big things that I found super helpful in the early days, and this was from Todd, from Shan, from some of my closest friends, but even from people that I never even expected to reach out, which was really lovely. To receive messages from people that you just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
wouldn't expect to necessarily be there. It just meant the world to us, didn't it? But the key things for me that I thought helped were like specific offers of help, if that makes sense. So, when somebody says, let me know if you need anything, call me if you need anything, obviously the intent in that is lovely, like you're trying to say something positive and something that is supportive, but it's very different in terms of the impact that it has to offering something specific for that person.
Mm.
Because realistically, Shannon and I are very similar in this respect. I do not ask for help. Like, even my mum used to say to me, "You would drown before you put your hand up to say you were drowning." That's how I am. So if somebody says to me, "Call me," or "Let me know if you need anything," you won't hear from me.
No.
And it's not that I don't really appreciate you saying that. I do, but it kind of loses a little bit of weight. It can be weightless unless you follow up with something that you're going to offer to do. So, for example, some of the key things that helped me were I had friends that cooked me meals, so I didn't have to worry about making food for myself, especially because I just had a baby as well. I'd have friends who would say, I'm going to the shops today. Do you need me to pick anything up for you? What do you need? Send me a list over if there's anything specific I can get for you. Um, Other things like, I'm going for a walk today. I'm just going to get a coffee. I'd love a bit of company. Do you fancy coming along with me? And I can just lend an ear. So just the more specific offers of something that somebody's much more likely, who's in their state of grief, are going to say, "Oh yeah, please actually, I do really need some nappies," or "I
Yeah.
do really need some milk." And otherwise, I'm not going to reach out to somebody that said, "Give me a call if you need anything," to ask them to get me nappies, because it's just not me as a person.
No, and I don't know many people that would.
No.
Like Laura said, specifics are the best way to do it. And I don't know, what's your take on flowers?
Uh, I think the sentiment is lovely, and it's a gorgeous thing to do, to send somebody flowers, because obviously it does mean you're thinking of them. But when you get so many, when you've lost somebody, you almost feel bad and guilty for the fact that, you
You don't have
know,
enough
do you have
vases.
enough
Yeah.
vases? Yeah. Um, yeah, and this is going to sound daft, but one of my mum's things that she used to say to me was that, flowers are for the living. She used to, she used to hate that flowers used to go to waste and stuff. And obviously, I'm not saying they go to waste, but
But it's not a time you're going to enjoy
you're
them,
not going
is
to
it?
enjoy them, yeah. And then you probably won't tend to them, care to them the same way that you normally would. So even though it's a lovely idea, I think like we've said, like somebody offering to cook you a meal, or to send you a meal over, or to get you some shopping, or even just to say, I'll tell you another thing actually that I found really helpful, that I was a bit shocked about, but it sticks with me now really, really vividly. Was I had quite a lot of appointments when mum first passed away, because I was really poorly after I first gave birth. And bless my mum, like she was the person that would come to some of them with me if Todd couldn't, and Todd pretty much was always at every appointment, bless him. But mum would also offer, or she'd go and pick up my
Mm.
medication for me. And I had one friend in particular, like that reached out and said, "I know you've got hospital appointments coming up. Can I come with you? Do you need me to go and pick up a prescription?" And honestly,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes me emotional to think about that. Person meant the world to me before, but even now that all of this has happened, I just think, wow, what a wonderful human being you are
Yeah.
to do that. So yeah, it's things like that, isn't it? It's the more sort of
Yeah. I actually didn't
specific
mind.
things.
I wasn't a big fan of the flowers. I'll be honest. Again, I think that's preference, but for me, it just like I wasn't really enjoying them. I didn't have enough vases. It was something else to kind of think about. Although the sentiment was nice, I remember receiving some from Anetta, one of your friends who I've got to know really well, and that hit me because I was like, I would never have anticipated her to send them. So it's a bit like a double edged sword what we're saying there, because in that instant that meant a lot, because I was a bit like, I wouldn't have thought she would.
Oh, she's an absolute angel.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
is.
again, she was like just absolutely phenomenal in supporting me and you, and of course
Yeah,
Annetta lost her dad, so
yeah.
she understood, and she wanted to make sure that you know you knew that she kind of felt your pain as well, I
Yeah.
think
And I
so.
had friends that were traveling at the time in like New Zealand and sent me sympathy cards all the way like from New Zealand to make sure that I felt like, and the sympathy cards I think I probably held on to more than the flowers, because when I was ready I could go back and read them,
Yeah,
and read people's kind words. So perhaps that's something to think about, is like, actually, if you're not sure whether to send flowers or not, I think a card could possibly be better in terms of a, again, we're not anticipating for you to answer this, to reply right now, or to read it, or to even message. Don't feel like you need to send a message on the back of this, but I just wanted to send you something physical
yeah.
to say that I care.
And it's super thoughtful to send anything. So, if you feel like that's what's best for you and your friend or the person that you love, then go ahead and do it. But as Shan said, don't feel, if you don't hear from somebody who sent you that you've sent flowers to, or you've sent a sympathy card to, and they've not reached out to say thank you,
Don't be
don't hold it
offended.
against them, because I've heard people say that as well
Yeah.
in the past. I can't believe this person's not reached out to me yet, to say thank you. And I just thought, the parents just died. Like, you're
Mm,
probably not top of the agenda, as lovely as it is that you sent the flowers. If you're expecting a response back from sending them, you're probably not sending them for the right reason,
yeah,
is the other thing. But
100%.
it's lovely if you do send something, but be authentic with it. Do it because you actually care and you want somebody to feel like you're thinking of them versus you just want to feel better about yourself because you've
Mm.
sent something to somebody who's in a bad place.
Should we go through? We've got a couple of questions that were sent to us and were asked by people that have watched our first episodes. If we just go through them and then we'll go
Yeah.
from there. So I had somebody reach out that says, does it upset us when friends or colleagues or whoever it is mentions their own mum or dad? You know, maybe they're doing something on Mother's Day or Father's Day, or, you know, it could be that you've lost a partner and they're talking about their partner or something like
Yeah. No, absolutely not.
that.
No,
No, just outright, quick
honestly,
answer, no.
no, it doesn't. And I'm I couldn't be happier for the fact that people still have
Yeah.
their parents and have an amazing relationship with them. Obviously, yeah, it's really sad for Shannon and I that our mum and dad aren't here, but we don't.
We don't resent you for having
No,
parents.
it's totally separate. And obviously, like, we care about you. We want we want you to be happy and to have a great and a healthy relationship with your parents. And if anything, you know,
I love to hear about people.
yeah, and take this as your sign to give them a bigger hug and to see them more, to talk about them more, because you don't know when your last day, unfortunately, will be with your parents. So that's something I always say. Although the one thing that I do struggle with, which is slightly separate, is if I go to M&S Cafe, which I often do,
You tell Laura's on maternity leave.
which yeah, I've just had another baby in case you haven't gathered. Um, if I see, and you often do in M&S Cafe, you'll know what I'm talking about if you go in the week. There's always mums with their mum, so the grandma, and their daughter or their son, that's the grandchild
Mm,
essentially. That really, really upsets me. Not because I'm like, oh, I think it's lovely that they do it. Obviously, it's
yeah.
emotional for me in the respect of it's so nice to see them doing that, but it breaks my heart that I can't do that with my mum and my
Yeah.
daughters.
I think in a
Oh,
similar way, for me, absolutely not. Don't ever feel like you can't speak about your dad when if you're talking to me. I'm thinking about my dad anyway. You're not going to set me off by talking about yours. If anything, it's nice to hear about those things. And again, the other side of it is like if you're going through a hard time with a parent, I can only talk for myself, but I would never get annoyed. And I have heard of people doing that that are grieving, going, "Well, I've lost my mum, so don't say that about your mum and this, that, and the other." Listen, parents are difficult. Yeah, like every parent is, um, like child situation is very different. So I think if you are also grieving, try and take that on board and not project that onto other people. You know, people are able to have hard times and difficult times with their parents or loved ones. That doesn't negate from the fact that you miss yours.
yeah, the
And
two things can coexist.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
try and, as the person grieving, I know it's difficult, but try not to do that as well, because I think that can make your friends probably feel like they can't talk about stuff. But also, you know, from my side, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. And similar to you, Law, I think the only time that I ever get upset is when I see I'm planning a wedding at the minute, and obviously when you're finding photographers and videographers and stuff like that, there's always clips from weddings of fathers doing their speech and the way that they would talk about their child and all those kind of things. And that does set me off a tiny bit, because I just think my dad's not going to get to do that for me. And I know that he would have loved to have done it. So they're the small things that probably when I look at, and not every time, but sometimes depending on what mood I'm in, I look at it and I go, oh God, that really does
Yeah.
hurt me a little bit. So yeah, I think they're no.
No, no is the short answer.
No.
But what I think is a nice idea, and I've had a few people do this recently, and that's why I thought I'd share it as well, is that
Ask.
yeah, ask about mum and ask about dad, or ask about that parent that somebody's lost or their loved one, because they will love to talk about them.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a case of I don't get upset if people talk about their mum to me, of course I don't, but it's so, so lovely if somebody says to me, "Oh, does your mum do that?" Or, "What does
Yeah.
your mum do in the," and, you can, because otherwise, if you don't get offered the opportunity, especially when a certain amount of time has passed, you feel a bit awkward just suddenly being like, "Oh, well, by the way, my mum did this,"
Yeah,
and
I do it all the time, I'm not gonna lie. But also, I think if you think your friend might struggle with hearing about it, ask them, "Do you
Yeah.
mind when I talk about my mum or dad, or would you rather I didn't?" You can ask the question. We're all humans, it's nice to be thoughtful, and it's nice to be asked sometimes. Like, honestly, yeah, I'm fine. Like, don't I'll tell you if it's upsetting me, and then you give people that space to say, actually, another day it'd be fine, but I am having a bit of a bad day today, so do you mind if we don't? And then, like we said, don't get offended if they say that, because you've given them the space to. So
Yeah, and also I guess actually on the back of that, it's maybe not best. Say, for example, if your friend who's just lost their parent is the person that you normally go to and confide in and go to for advice, I guess.
oh, this is a big one
If
actually.
you're if they've just lost their parent and you're suddenly going through a bit of a rough time with a parent, they're probably not the best person
No,
for you to go to for support. So just
actually,
be,
forget a parent. Anything. If you're going
yeah,
through a rough time, it could be at work or with your partner or whatever, just in those early few months, please don't bring that up to your friend, because if they're anything like me and Laura, they'll still try to be there for you, but actually they're just so emotionally drained, they're a bit checked out, and you might pick that up from them. And it's not done with bad intent, but there's just only so much you've got to give. And I think if you feel like, as somebody that is going through a difficult time, if you feel that speaking to a certain friend or family member takes a lot of energy from you, you tend to try and stay away from them a little bit. And that's not very nice, but it's just because you've not got anything to give. And if you know they're going to ask something of you, you kind of go, oh, I've just not really got the energy today. So even if you ask to go on a walk with them, they might actually fancy the walk, but they might go, oh, I know that I'm going to have to hear about XYZ. And normally that would be absolutely fine. And I would love to be there for my friend. But, my dad just died 3 weeks ago. So I
you don't
probably
have the
don't want to
emotional
talk about it.
capacity.
No.
You don't even have the emotional
You
capacity.
need low maintenance friends and family when you're grieving.
Yeah. So I think that is an important one. So it's never a case of not talking about parents or even like Shan said, anything that you might be struggling with. But in those early days when you are, if your default friend is the person that's lost somebody, just try to take as much off their plate as you can. So try not to go to them with anything additional that can add sort of pressure. It's different later on, maybe, isn't
Yeah.
it? I think when you get to a certain point, um, and you're in a slightly better headspace yourself and you're having more better days than bad days, and you found a way to manage, then obviously then you can start to sort of bring some of those things back to the table. But otherwise, just be a little bit sensitive to that, I think.
Yeah. And there was a question that came through, Laura. I believe it came to you. How to offer to support to someone who is about to lose their loved one, and maybe even just when they lose them, what would, and I think we've covered that a tiny bit, but
Yeah, that's hard, and it's heartbreaking. And like we've said before, there's no, all loss is difficult, whether it's unexpected, whether it's sudden, whether it's something that has been ongoing for some time because somebody's poorly. And I think if you're in that position right now that you've got a friend that's just about to lose their loved one, similar to the advice we've given for once your friend
mm,
or person that you really care about has lost their loved one, you just want to bring that stuff in earlier, just be more of a constant, just constantly check in on whether they need anything specifically. And if it is, say for example, if somebody's in maybe a hospice or in hospital, can I take something to the hospital for you?
yeah,
Can I give you a lift there? If they've got children, can I look after the children for an hour so you can go and spend time
yeah,
with the loved one that potentially you're about to lose? Um, it's all of those ideas that you can bring to the table to just make their life that little bit not easier, because obviously it's not easy when you know that you're about to lose somebody, but anything that you can sort of take away that could be a distraction from them spending time with their loved one, I think is a
Mm,
huge thing. Just do anything that you can, offer anything you can that can give them some of that extra precious time with
yeah.
the person they're about to lose.
Because I remember, Laura, even you saying things to me like I was having to write a Facebook post for my dad's wake and telling people where to go. And you said to me, "Do you want me to just forward you what I wrote?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Please, please," because I haven't got the capacity to think about it. And that, even those small, tiny things like that, it meant a lot to me
Oh
because it
gosh,
just saved
huge.
me a job of having to think about what to write to tell people to turn up at a specific, which sounds so easy, but when you're grieving, you're like, is that the right word? Do I say that? Do I need the time? Like, it's just everything takes 10 years longer than it should do because you've got massive brain fog and your brain's not functioning
You're
in the
running
right
on
way.
empty. That's what it is. You're running on empty because you're exhausted. You're mentally exhausted. You're emotionally exhausted, and grief is a physical thing as well. Like
Yeah.
there's lots of scientific studies that show
It
how,
changes your face shape and everything, apparently.
yeah, literally. And I think that's one of the big things, that now if you are in a position where unfortunately you know that somebody is going to lose somebody, it's even things like asking them, do you want to talk about it? Do you want me? Is there anything that I can do that will help to support you through this right now? And they might have specific things that you can do, because
Mm,
they could be in a slightly different headspace in terms of, I need to do X, Y, and Z, but gosh, it would be really helpful if somebody could take this off me and I could just
mm,
focus on the other two things. So
yeah.
just being forward with what you can offer versus just saying, reach out if you need me, because they probably won't.
And some of the other questions I think we've answered, Law, throughout the episode of what helped us, how did we navigate those early days, and actually we were quite different. So the day that Laura's mum died, obviously I came to yours and I spent that day with you, whereas I needed a couple of days, didn't I, before you saw me. I just said,
I'm not ready.
I'm not ready. Like,
Yeah.
because you offered, you would have been there the day that it happened. You and Todd both said you'll drive down. And I was like, as much as I would appreciate that, can we leave it a couple of days? Because I'm just in shock. And I don't think that I'm even prepared to have words. I just need silence.
Yeah.
And that's that's what I needed at that time. So let your friend direct you, let them tell you what they want and need, and have that I suppose it's that knowing where that boundary is with your friend. If Laura had just turned up on that day, it would have been overwhelming for me. So if your friend says, actually, please don't turn up, please give me a couple of days, then that is what you should do. But if you want to drive past and put a care package on their doorstep and then drive off and say, just so you know, I'm still giving you space, I'm not going to come in, but I have left some treats for you and a bit of food and things like that on your stairs, just so you know that I'm thinking of you and it's on your doorstep, but we don't need to see each other, but I'm here if you need me. That is probably the best way to do it. So you're still there, you're still making sure that you're available, but you're not overstepping the mark and forcing them to speak when maybe they're not quite ready. So
Yeah. And you'll feel it, won't you? I think,
yeah.
especially if it's somebody that you are close to, like you'll notice a bit of a shift. And I know you inside and out. So if Shannon had said to me, "Oh, I don't want you there," but I knew she did want me there, obviously I would have pushed a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But I knew that you meant it. I knew that when you said, "Oh, Laura, I'm not quite ready right now," and I said, I completely respect it, love you.
Mm.
I'm here, and I think I did send you like a little vegan package
Yeah, I think you
actually.
did,
Yeah.
yeah.
um,
But it was different as well because my stepson was there, who would have been, gosh, he would have only been 13. And I was gonna, me and Jamie had to have the conversation with him that my dad had passed away. And,
yeah.
I didn't want to go into any great depths with him. He knew what happened. We always told him what happened, but not in any detail. Just that my dad had decided he didn't want to be here anymore because he was going to hear it. There was no point lying about it because he would overhear conversations, and obviously I was upset. But I didn't want to necessarily have the deeper conversations with you or anyone else in front of him. So not only did I need that space, but actually I was respecting that what's appropriate to talk about
Of
in front of
course.
young individuals, specifically because of the way that my dad died. But yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for the questions, because it gives us different topics to talk about. And I think we didn't realize that that would be such a big, um, there's a lot of our friends and family, I think, that are listening that have heard our story in a different way to how they experienced with us at the time, because, maybe we're more open now than what we were initially
Oh
when
gosh,
our
yeah. I
parents
couldn't
first passed away.
speak. Like I was literally like a mute for a couple of weeks, which anybody who knows me knows
Yeah,
is the complete
Jesus.
opposite to how I normally am. But yeah, thank you. And we want to continue to keep doing this for you. And like we said, we are quite different, aren't we, in terms of how we've navigated certain things. But then a lot of the stuff we've done the same. So if we can just give you a bit of a variation of things that have helped, things that maybe haven't, then you can try a few things out. You're never gonna do the wrong thing by,
No.
even just saying that you're there for somebody and reaching out to them. And it's just being a little bit conscious and reading the room a little bit in terms of maybe how they're responding that day. And
Yeah.
then you'll know a little bit more as to whether to offer something else or to actually just take a little bit of a step back.
And the final point I would add would be, if your friend says they don't want to talk about it today, it doesn't mean in 3 days' time or 4 weeks' time or whatever that they might be ready. So just make sure that you're reinforcing that. And it doesn't always have to be, are you ready to speak about your mum now? Are you ready?
Share a memory if you knew
Yeah.
them. If like people do this with me quite often, um, actually even now they'll say, "Oh, your mum did, your mum did this, your mum did that," and that makes my day. And I think
Mm,
that's important, isn't it? It's not just the early days. If anything, it's even more impactful later on,
yeah.
because after 2 years, I'm sure you feel the same, Shan, with it approaching your dad's anniversary as well, of a similar time frame. People do stop asking, and that's normal. I think in the early days you sort of get overwhelmed, don't you, with it? But then all of a sudden it kind of disappears, and just be conscious of that as well. If you have got friends who have lost anybody that was very important to them, parent, partner, anybody really, just be conscious of the time of year it is, because there'll be times of the year that are much harder for that person. And of course, the festive period is really, really difficult
Yeah.
for most people. So just being able to ask them if they want to speak about their
Yeah.
loved one, or sharing a memory if you have one of them, will really go a long way and will help people massively through their grief, won't it?
Yeah, and I've always, there's a few friends that haven't lost anyone, but always message me on Father's Day and things like that, and are just like, thinking of you today, like, here if you want to talk. And
Oh,
that always
nice.
touches my heart, and goes, like, I appreciate that a lot. And I think even one of my friends sent me a card on Father's Day myself, just to say, like, I know that your dad's not here, but, and it's those tiny sort of sentimental things that
Oh, they're massive.
just, then, even if they're not talking to you about it all the time, that they're thinking about you all the time, and that's the nicest bit. But yeah, thank you. Hopefully this episode's been useful for people that are potentially grieving, but also the ones that are supporting of those that are grieving or about to be grieving. Yeah, I think we all deal with it in different ways. I would never anticipate any of my friends to deal with it in the same way that I did. So that's something to be mindful of as well. If you went straight back to work, don't assume that everybody else will, and vice versa. It's what's right for that individual. So it's just about letting them take the lead. But yeah, give us a follow on, what we on, Law?
We're on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify.
YouTube, Facebook. Yeah, if you've not already followed the page or subscribed, please do, because it helps us out. And you get notifications when we do a new episode, which is every Friday. So thank you for tuning in again.
See you soon.